You are listening to Where is the Music podcast. My name is Alberto, and on this program I will talk about music in all its forms. I discuss the creative part, the understanding of music, the role that music has in our culture, our shared life, our psyche, and I will do that with the help of my piano. You can find me on all major podcasting platforms and my work as composer, pianist and teacher at albertoferro.com. This podcast has no sponsor. If you like to support me, click the link to my Patreon page, available in the description. With a contribution as little as few dollars a month, you will significantly help me keep doing what I do. Now, on to this episode of Where is the Music? Hello everyone. Today I'm gonna talk about musical symbolism, and I'm gonna talk about it perhaps introducing more historical context and perhaps even slightly philosophical, not too much, I promise. So let's try at least to make a initial distinction between symbolism and impressionism. You will see very soon why impressionism is important in today's conversation. So there is a basic fact about appreciating visual art. Every time we recognize an image being represented in a painting, we need to acknowledge that it is not seeing the image that triggers our enjoyment or the appreciation of the painting, but it is the way in which that image is being represented beyond the features of that subject portrayed that is telling us something more about that subject, something that might not be visible in normal life, something that requires the perspective of an artist to emerge. So with music, we need to understand that the process by which we intuitively perceive that something is being represented, like color, light, movement, or things like water, fire, or emotions like joy or anger, whatever we think it is being represented musically is coming through an extra step of our imagination, which is eventually something very personal and individual. So the composer presents us with sounds. Those sounds are perceived, reorganized, made sense of in our imagination. And our imagination comes up with models, images, forms, shapes, colors, movements, emotions, ideas. Sound represent things because our own individual creativity reacts to sound. It is us who are capable somehow to link sounds to other non-sound things. For example, sometimes the piano sounds like water. The voice of a singer sounds like an angel. Or a minor chord sounds like sadness. This is rather different than seeing something being represented directly on a canvas. To hear something being represented in music requires an extra step of imagination. In other words, music cannot really represent anything. It is us who might be more or less inclined to give visual representation of what we hear. So I'm bringing this up because something happened roughly 120 or 130 years ago in the history of music, and we know that impressionism came along in visual arts, particularly in paintings, and if we are to find parallel music, we naturally think of the music of Debussy or Ravel. At least this is what they teach in schools. Impressionism has been described as the way of an artist to portray a subject by just giving a quick impression of it, suggesting that the truth and beauty that we catch in a moment might be more powerful, more meaningful than the one that we grasp through detailed, sophisticated analysis, which was perhaps the preferred approach in that moment of history. Remember, we are now in the 1800s, so the culture is filled with scientific discoveries. The Enlightenment has brought to the broader culture a deeper appreciation for the potential of human intelligence. It has developed values of rationality as a way to deal with reality. The number of universities is growing, and they are becoming more open to the public. All fields of knowledge are entering the encyclopedia. So there is a growing trust in the power of rationality. With Impressionism, we have this appealing suggestion that phenomena like color, light, movement, things that are very hard to study, to put in a form or fix on a canvas. Thanks to Impressionism, we have a sense now that these things carry as much, if not more, meaning than the careful depiction and a precise, accurate representation. To me, this is perhaps the most significant aspect of Impressionism. It has never been very clear to me how Impressionism in visual arts will translate in music. And the natural connection with the music of Debussy made sense only for certain aspects, but not for others. For example, it is true that the classical harmony and the classical melody are somehow being transformed. It is hard to find so-called, classically melodies in Debussy, and the so-called functional harmony, which is the way chords have been used in the past 200 years to give a sense of trajectory, tension, and release in music. Well, all of this in Debussy is gone. But how can a musician give an impression of a subject if, as we were mentioning earlier, that subject only appears in the listener's imagination? We were saying earlier that music cannot represent things. So how can a musician give just an impression of the thing being represented? How does Impressionism work in music? The answer to this question is one word. It's through symbols. My central argument is that musical impressionism brings the symbol back to its central role in musical discourse. So, what is a symbol? First of all, symbol is the mechanism by which we can think things outside the here and now, things in the past, things in the future, things that are possible or impossible. Symbol is the gate to imagination. The letters we use to write and communicate are symbols. Compounds of letters allow us to imagine the things that we say. Symbols are found on the road to communicate instructions quickly and effectively. Symbols are shortcuts to things that are not currently inhabiting our reality. Symbols are not representations, although they often are visually related to the thing being symbolized. For example, the circle we use to write the letter O, one might argue, looks like the shape of our lips when we say the letter O. And here are some examples of acoustic symbols, musical ones. This is a prelude by Debussy, which we don't know what we are supposed to think, what we are supposed to imagine, what is the visual idea that Debussy had in mind. But at the end of it, he writes a note, "Des pas sur la neige," which, if I recall, means steps on the snow. How about this other one? We once again don't know exactly what this should be, but at the end of the piece, Debussy suggests it's about Les Collines d'Anacapri. We are the hills of Anacapri, a beautiful town on a gorgeous Italian island. So I don't know whether if I hear it I can imagine right away those hills, but I also know that this is not a classical melody, this is not functional harmony, but the gesture makes me think of, I don't know, the flight of a bird or the movement of a tree in a windy summer or spring afternoon. And this, which is a wrong chord, it is actually a wrong. Perfect. It's, to me, suggests a shimmer of light, a quick vibration. Actually, he writes it like this. So, as I was saying, thanks to musical impressionism, now the symbol is back into the musical discourse. But why bring it back? Where did it go? Previous musical styles were already filled with symbols. Symbols for emotions, ideas, maybe even colors, symbols for movements, for events. Music, with its attempts at representing reality, was using symbols all the way. Think of a Chopin waltz. Can we deny that a waltz is a symbol of the actual dance? Remember, it can't represent the dance, but through the power of symbolism, it allows us to picture it in our mind. The steps, the movement, the exchanges, the phrasing. Or think of a Beethoven symphony. How can we think of things like a battle between good and evil, the hero's struggles, or tragedy or redemption, how can we think about all of this just by hearing violins and bassoons? But we know that neither Romantic classic nor Baroque music were particularly interested in the direct communication of musical imagery for their moment-by-moment appreciation. They were more interested in form and style, expression. Composers at the time were developing their craft either by following the canon or going against it. The attention was put on style, on form, on originality, and not in the evocative potential of sound. Here's a few examples. This was Mozart, and now this is Haydn. This was Bach from the Well-Tempered Clavier. One last example. And this was Beethoven. So all these examples are in D major for a reason, because it doesn't matter the sound of the key that much. It doesn't even matter the timbre, the articulation, or even whether I use the pedal or not that much. What matters is the character of this music. And I chose those exactly for this purpose, to show that this music is interesting and unique because of the style it is being written with, not because of the actual sound. It would be equally interesting, or at least it's the nature and the meaning of the music won't be dramatically changed if we were to set up this music for example, for an orchestra or for a string quartet. The character won't change that much. So this is to say that the beauty of it is in the way the composer has arranged those notes in order to make a particular character emerge. While with Debussy, with the examples that I previously made from Debussy, it's the evocative potential of those sounds that starts going in at the forefront of musical communication. This is why composers like Debussy, Ravel, or Wagner are bringing back symbolism to the musical discourse. Musical symbols have always been part of music, but it is in this moment in history that composers realize how sound, not a sonata, a melody, or a cadence, but how sound only can be enough to trigger ideas in the listener, that sound has a potential on its own. It is from this moment onwards that orchestras start opening the doors to instruments that were just unconceivable before. Think of percussion, saxophones, or bells. So if Beethoven, Mozart, and Bach have been writing only for strings, woodwinds, and brass, that's because the evocative potential of sound was not their first concern. It was rather the way sounds were organized together to give meaning to their music, through a sonata, through a cadence, through a chord sequence. So 50 years after the musical impressionism, you can hear works with all sorts of acoustic effects, and nowadays there is no limit to which instrument could be part of a musical composition. So musical impressionism has taught us something that we always intuitively knew about music, that sound is a sensible thing. Creating sound is a way to convey ideas, that the physical, sensitive appreciation of sound, whatever that sound is, can be a meaningful part of human experience. While before that was a privilege restricted to those sounds organized through the style and custom of the epoch, of the time period they were in. I'm gonna bring in a couple of famous examples. One more from Debussy. This is probably one of his most famous preludes, La Fille aux Cheveux de Laine, and the reason because it's famous is possibly because it's not prohibitive for pianists to play, while most of other Debussy preludes are. So just the very beginning goes in a very symbolic way. What do I mean symbolic way? That this, what you just heard, seems to suggest that there is something soft and sweet and not particularly meaningful, but it's just the feel of something rather fleeting, such as a young girl hair. He writes très calme et doucement expressive, very very calm and sweetly expressive. He also writes sans rigueur, without any rigor, without any precision, rigor, freely. The melody here is not a melody. It's just a feel. Could be probably something else. Something, whatever. The idea is the specific notes, the melodic aspect, and of course the harmonic matters less than the evocative power of this phrase. Another example I'm gonna bring is from Ravel. This is not the beginning but the end of the prelude from his Tombeau de Couperin. It is just a few bars, and I wanted to bring it up because, well, first of all, it's an effect that I love, but you can hear to me sounds like a butterfly. It is nothing else other than a butterfly. It just she has stopped on on a tree, on a plant, on a flower, and now she's just gone away. So interesting, huh? Now the last example from today is not neither from Debussy nor Ravel. This is Britney Spears. Well, I'm sure you have recognized the tune. This is Toxic. Why do I bring this up in a episode about music symbolism? Because this to me is a perfect example of musical symbolism. I never really put any thought until few weeks ago. I was in Italy and I was having coffee outside, as you do, and a car just had a very close. A car had like a break-in, was brakes, and you could hear this very screeching sound coming from the brakes, from the wheels, and that sound was in just a moment reminded me of this thing. Was screeching and had me jump a little bit. What's happening right away? And I didn't even know right away that what that sound reminded me was from this song. I had to just go a little bit back in my database, memory database, and figure out it was coming from this song. But I made the connection. How come the brakes from a car made me think of this song? Well, it is one of those very smart operations which in pop happens all the time, in which a sound, I think this is probably a synthesizer emulating the sound of high violins and strings, although I don't think it's real strings. It sounds like just a digital synthesizer, but the effect that that car braking in the middle of the road had me like, it took like a split of a second to react, rather concerned. Is it an accident about to happen? Is everyone going to be okay? Well, that is the unconscious reaction that this little motif is aiming at triggering in the listeners. So concern, a little bit of it makes perfect sense with the rather terrifying feel that this song possibly wants to communicate. This song is called Toxic, and it does seem perfectly in line with this idea that whoever is singing or whoever is being portrayed it's either dangerous and needs you to be very careful and very cautious. So these four notes in this register played by that instrument are supposed to communicate symbolically this sense of danger, and they do it so well that this song becomes a hit. Of course, it's not just those, but you realize that how somehow precise and accurate are these four notes to the purpose, the general content of the song. It is a symbol of our concern. And how do I know that? Because I heard that same sound, or a very similar sound, in a real life experience, through the screeching sound of a car braking suddenly. So how interesting, huh? So symbolism operates exactly in this manner. Kudos to the producers of this song who can just take advantage of this mechanism in this way. All right, thank you for listening, everyone. I'm going to play a little bit of Debussy for you, and before you wonder what exact piece by Debussy this one is, because you might be already familiar with it, I ask you, what images does this suggest to you? What symbols might be these sounds for? What could have come to the composer's mind to invent and compose these sounds? I'm gonna leave you with this thought and this music. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time on Where is the Music podcast. Bye. Thanks for listening to Where is the Music podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, look up for others. I made a few. I publish an episode every week roughly, investigating each time a different aspect of music. The music making, the music listening, the meaning of music, and its relevance in our lives. It is very helpful for me if you like, subscribe, follow on your favorite platform. Where is the Music is on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, TuneIn, and Google Podcasts. If you like to support me, you're free to do so through Patreon, link in description. Thank you again. Until next time.